When we think about student centered math classrooms, collaboration often takes the spotlight, but individual work has its own important moment, giving students space to make sense of ideas, reflect, and prepare to share their thinking. So today, we're going to explore how to make that individual time truly meaningful. That's all coming up on this episode of Some Shenanigans. All right. Well, welcome back to Some Shenanigans, and thank you for joining us for the third part of our mini series on supporting multiple modes of instruction in the math classroom. I'm Bree. I'm a professional learning specialist at CPM. And as always, I am thrilled to be joined by my co-host, Adam Barnes. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you. Can't say too many people have said they're thrilled to be, but I appreciate that.
It's nice to hear.
Yeah, it's a safe space here, Adam.
Yeah.
We're happy to have you. And we're lucky to have Joel Miller back again to close out this series. Welcome, Joel.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
Yeah. Do you have a fun fact for us today?
I do. So, if you do not know, I have a fun fact calendar on my desk. Today's fun fact is that tears contain a natural painkiller which reduces pain and improves your mood. So make your students cry.
Yeah, I was wondering, do I need to cry more?
Yeah, that's our mode of instruction, right?
I guess my 5-year-old must be pain-free then.
Yeah.
Oh, we love that. Thanks, Joel.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right. So if you have been tuning in, you'll know that Joel and Adam and I have been exploring different modes of instruction and when to use them and how to use them effectively. So in the first two episodes, we discussed whole class discussions and partner work. So if you haven't jumped into those episodes, we encourage you to give those a listen. But in today's episode, we're going to shift gears and focus on individual work. And so as I was thinking about individual work and thinking about our other conversations, I kind of started thinking about how sometimes when it comes to a student-centered classroom, there can be this idea that everything needs to be collaborative and that there's not really a lot of space or time for individual work time. I don't know if you all have kind of encountered thoughts around individual work time that are similar.
Yeah, I've definitely had discussions about the importance of that individual time to think and get familiar with the context of a problem, those types of things.
Yeah. But I just was thinking about how much I've appreciated our conversations about different modes because it's reminded me that every single mode of instruction has a purpose and has its own moment. And so I'm excited to just round up the series and dive into just the importance of individual time and how we can use it to support students. So with that, Joel and Adam, why don't we just if we can just reflect on our own classrooms, when do you use individual work time or when have you used individual work time in your own classroom? How have you used it to support students?
I think for me, individual, like the mode of instruction, individual work is sort of separate from the other three because I've always viewed it as it's never the end game or the last thing we do of a task or as part of a lesson. I've always seen it as sort of a bridge in between doing one of the other modes. So like, as an example, I might give students an opportunity to think or reflect or read through a problem, something like that. But then eventually they're going to share out with their small group or share out in a partner or share with the whole class. So I guess I've kind of interesting that I've always seen this mode of instruction as never being like the final destination. It's always been a bridge to something else that is eventually going to lead to some sort of collaboration in the classroom.
Yeah, I could say something similar too, where like I just think of a strategy of think, pair, share, think, pair, share. Has that individual component, right? But it's still going into a pair, still going into a share. Or you had mentioned reading. Sometimes reading should be individual. Or even like think of those state tests or those summative tests that we give. It doesn't even have to be a state test. Even in our rooms, we ask our students to do that individually sometime, hopefully to maybe display some knowledge, again, leading to some sort of summative answer, or maybe it's formative. I mean, there's just so many places it could go. Uh, you're reminding me too, I had caught this out of the book Visible Mathematics, and Hattie, one of the authors, had written that alone individual work has a pretty low effect size if it's just left alone. So that can point to something like that. But when it's added into then a strategy of collaboration or a mixed space practice sort of a idea, then the effect size jumps quite large to over zero point 0.4 for sure.
Hmm. That makes a lot of sense. And that makes me think about, if I think about my own classroom and when I use why when and why I use individual work as a mode. For me, it's typically to provide processing time.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if there's a problem with a lot of context, I know myself as a learner, I need time to read something, to hear it, to highlight, to make sense of all the information that I have. Um, and then, Joel, you also kind of briefly, I think you said like to give kids a chance to sort of share what they know too.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes sense that that would happen at the beginning of a problem where you're processing all this information to use it somewhere else, and make sense of
Right.
what you already do know and what you can apply to a problem or bring to a conversation.
And I think like to bring the realistic point, right, that I think all teachers deal with is if there's individual work but no accountability afterward, like sharing or turning in or something like that, some of our students are just not going to do it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, right, like so there is like from a classroom management perspective, there's also like the opportunity or the point that if individual work is kind of where it ends, and there's then like students may not do it unless there's some sort of accountability followed up.
And to add to that, I think too is to in order to value that independent work, you got to have some sort of structure, some sort of expectation of what they're going to do with that individual work. So
Yeah.
oftentimes I'll see in a classroom where students are working individually, but then it's summarized for them by somebody else, maybe a student, maybe the teacher, so that the thinking that they had done, they didn't take it anywhere. They just compared it to what somebody else is doing. So their individual time maybe wasn't honored as much as it could be, because if you were put in a situation where you get to share or you have to have something prepared to bring to the table, then you're more invested in that individual time for yourself.
I think that really speaks to how different modes work like in tandem with one another. Like I mean, I think the the think pair share example kind of shows that like to bring something to the table, you need time to think about it.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, giving kids time to think about something and then having like nowhere to take that to apply that thinking, it kind of makes sense both ways.
Totally.
And I think it's important too that like when I think about individual work, I also feel like I have to point out to teachers that that's not the same thing as just leaving students alone.
Hmm.
Right. I'm not just giving a task or giving some work and saying, okay, work on this thing individually, and then boom, I'm gone. Right. As a teacher, I still want to facilitate. I still want to visit students, ask questions. And then again, we've already talked about that accountability piece. Like you're going to work on something individual, but you're going to get some sort of feedback, whether you're sharing out your thought or sharing out what you wrote or getting feedback on a work. So individual work doesn't mean we're just leaving students alone. Like, okay, good luck. Have fun. I'll see you in 50 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think too, students need just practice having that alone and independent think time. Because reality is that they do get assessed later on, and a lot of those assessments are individual, right?
Right.
So I think that we as teachers need to provide space for students to develop skills to um, to kind of problem solve on their own and to be able to look at information and process that independently and make a plan independently. Um, so I think it's a skill that we had to practice.
Absolutely. And just as we say, we have to teach kids to work in groups, teach them how to work together. We also need to instruct how to work alone. And so I think of technology. A lot of people have phones these days, and your individual may be on that phone looking at information. So how do you critically think about that information? How do you know what you're seeing is true or not true? Things like that
Yeah,
we need to show.
absolutely.
So what are some like strategies, like specific strategies? I mean, we kind of talked about how, individual work might be a bridge to other strategies or to other modes. So we mentioned the thinking pair share. Are there any other kind of strategies that have individual components? Because I was thinking, I don't think at CPM, I don't think we have any strategies that are like, okay, you do this alone and then that's it, right? They're all very similar to think pair share, where there might be an individual component piece, but that's not the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one thing that comes to mind is just uh, reflection journals and things like learning logs. Um, so that's not necessarily, I guess, a strategy, but that is a time and place where a student might just independently write down their thoughts and not do anything with them in the moment. I think it's a time for them to consolidate their thinking. And I think those reflections become powerful when students revisit them later on, and that still can be an independent thing. Uh, Another strategy that comes to mind, reflection strategy, is the stoplight closure strategy, where it's a closure strategy where there's a red light, green light, and yellow light, and you ask students to kind of reflect on where their thinking kind of landed. So,
Mhm.
did their thinking stop because of something? Is there something that moved their thinking forward? That would be the green light, and then something that maybe stalled their thinking partially, the yellow light. But that gives them some independent time, and they're not necessarily an accountability component, but there is a component of formative assessment because a teacher gets to then read and see where they're at and then respond to that in the following lesson. So that reflection and kind of consolidation part of the lesson is where I see a need for some independent time as well.
Yeah, to add to that too, specific strategies. You're talking about the reflection piece. And so initially, a strategy that you could use that shows individual time would be like the 3 reads. So that's a language routine that you could use in your classroom where you're reading the text 3 different times with a different lens. And that first lens could be an independent lens where you're just trying to make sense of it for yourself. The second time, maybe you turn to your partner and you're pulling out vocabulary. Third part, what is this question really asking? Or what are the math questions or information being presented? That could be one type of strategy for individual. But with the reflection, I'm thinking like a math chat where there's posters displayed and students are going around the room responding. That could also be done in a pair, also done in a group, but that could be done individually. Or an exhibit visit, but do it a museum style, where you're just thinking about what you see and you're reflecting on your own notes and making sense of that for yourself.
Was sticking with my theme over the last couple of episodes and preference when I talk to teachers is what are kind of those low prep, pull out of your pocket anytime to use. And so I think of like a notice and wonder, right? Like it's, again, you can really bust that out at any time, right? Graph on the screen, a chart in the book, anything like that. What do you notice? What do you wonder, right?
Yeah.
Again, how I would use it in the classroom is it's a bridge, right? So there's that individual thinking time. Let students come up with their notices, their wonders, but then there's going to be an accountability portion of that, whether that's combined with a turn and talk, which we mentioned last episode. turn and talk to your partner, or it's going to be, I need you to contribute to the math chat, like Joel suggested. So notice and wonder. Those are easy,
like
no prep, just pull it out.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good one.
And as you were kind of describing that, Adam, just these easy strategies, like easy, no prep. I also feel like another common theme here is that this independent time, I think, should is all oftentimes should be pretty open too. Like it should be it should be focused enough to let students know like what they should be thinking about, reflecting on. But I think, I just think back to when I used to sit down and write. A lot of times when I sit down and write something, I give myself a chance to just brain dump. And that means write down everything that comes to mind, however it comes to mind, without any sort of structure. That often allows me to get the most out of, retrieve the most information and make sense of it in the best way that I can. So I think just giving students an open time to just recall what makes sense to them, what landed for them, keeping it really open is important, and also something I'm just kind of seeing amongst these strategies.
Yeah.
There's one thing I call that out. So
Yeah, and as we kind of, this is the last episode of our mini series, and just kind of reflecting on all of our discussions, it really is about structure, right? Like no matter what mode of instruction you're using, there needs to be that structure. And the structure might be, yes, it's open-ended. There also might be, no, I want you to talk about this specific question, or specific part. But I think the general overview, right, or kind of takeaway is no matter what mode of instruction you're using, there's got to be structure to it.
yeah,
Definitely.
structure, a focus. Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I'm going to do my best to sum this up. Okay.
let's hear
I
it.
don't know how many times we get to do this at the end before people just like, I'm feeling the viewers like just eyes roll, but we're going to keep going with it. So as we wrap up our talk on individual work, again, one way to view individual work is as a bridge, right? Getting students to do something focused, something individual, maybe some reflections or some practice, but then it's a bridge to being able to collaborate at some point, whether that's with a partner, back into their small groups, or part of a whole class discussion. It's a way for students to really make sense and kind of get those initial thoughts, right? And like we pointed out, like unfortunately, the system, the education system assessment is individual, so students do need practice on that. But what's going to support them most is providing them time to practice actually doing work and thinking individually. And again, you can use individual work as a way to facilitate reflection, right? Get students reflecting, synthesize their ideas, and, be ready to share out and reflect. So,
Yeah.
Love it.
Awesome. Well, it's been great having you here, Joel.
Great to be here.
Yeah. Definitely miss you. I might go shed a couple tears to relieve some of that pain.
I think you should.
it's a great
I think you
callback.
should.
I was going to go something like, okay, I hope we get reciprocal invites onto the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. You've been on before, so this is maybe.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Okay. Oh, okay. We
it's
got to
pretty-
read
But
it.
it's got things to say.
In fact, let me check my calendar. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again for joining us, Joel.
Okay. Anytime.
Yeah.
We just want to remind you one more time. We encourage you to like, comment, subscribe, do all the things. Leave a comment down below. How do you support individual work in your classroom? What are some of those individual go-to strategies? We'd love to hear and read. And of course, share this with a friend, a colleague, and we'll help get the word out on these multiple modes of instructions.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll
See you
on the
next
Yeah.